Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. The Designing Hollywood podcast show is dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals.
Hi, I'm Gilbert Musali, the new president and CEO of Western Costume, welcoming Designing Hollywood back to Western. You're at the biggest costume house in the U.S., the oldest costume house in the U.S. We've been around over 112 years now. We consider ourselves the one-stop shop for all your costuming needs here. With our two extra buildings next door, we're at roughly around 150,000 square feet. There are roughly 2.5 million costumes. If you need to get supplies, we can help you with that. If you need fabric, we can help you with that. Order fabric from around the world, anywhere you need. Deck out a full army if you want in our military department. Here's our supply store, catering to all your costuming needs. Thank you, Designing Hollywood, for coming in to see Western Costume. Hope to see you soon.
Today is a very special episode of Designing Hollywood. We have two people sharing the same madness. That is Joker 2, Folie à Deux. Not a Folie à Deux. I think I got it right. Arianne Phillips is one of the most unique creative forces in the fashion and entertainment industries. As a multidimensional visual artist, she brings her exemplary vision to film, fashion, theater, opera, music, and media. She's no stranger to working on mid-century films, from Brad Pitt's Hawaiian Shirt and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to Reese Witherspoon's Perky Frocks and Walk the Line. She's at home with a variety of 1950s and 60s looks, including the upcoming movie starring Timothée Chalamet about Bob Dylan. All of Arianne's projects are rooted in her love of storytelling, and her unique collaborations have fostered deep and far-reaching relationships with the world's most celebrated artists and designers. And our next guest is cinematographer Lawrence Sher. He grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, and went to Wesleyan University. He's known for his work on the first Joker, for which he received an Oscar nomination for Best Cinematography. No stranger to tight spaces, Sher started his career creating low-budget cinematic magic with independent gems such as Garden State and Kissing Jessica Stein. Since 2009, he's formed a prolific creative partnership with Todd Phillips, shooting critical and fan favorites, including Joker, Joker 2, and the Hangover films. He also shot I Love You Man, which is a particular favorite of mine. In recent years, he's expanded his resume to entrepreneur with the creation of Shot Deck, a film still library that assists directors, cinematographers, designers, ad people, film students, and visual artists in bringing their artistic visions to life. For Lawrence Sher, the focus has always been on the director. That philosophy has carried Sher's imagery to millions of filmgoers. Whatever success I've achieved comes from the fact that I care as deeply about the movie as the director does, says Sher. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome costume designer Arianne Phillips and cinematographer Lawrence Sher to the Designing Hollywood show. It's so great to have the two of you here at the same time. Thanks for being here. So to start with, the two of you are now under pressure, I guess, to follow up an Academy Award winning, Joaquin Phoenix gave one of the great performances of all time in the first Joker, a movie that on a $65 million spend made over $1 billion, one of the most successful films ever made for its budget, especially at the studio level. And so, and a movie also that people said, we're not going to make this, But once a movie makes $1 billion, of course you're going to make another one. So I wonder if we could hear from both of you. Tell us the story of how you both became involved in this project. And Larry, for you, was it a daunting, was it, you're going to have to follow up something that made so much money and had so many accolades and had became a favorite of people around the world. What happens when that occurs? Tell us the story.
Well, for me, it started with Todd basically saying, we have a new idea for a second Joker. I think there was no question in my mind, even before the movie was a tremendous success, which of course, as you mentioned, will usually manifest itself in another one. because there's money to be made. But I knew that it wasn't going to be really about money. But I knew that in the end of Joker, I could tell just desperately that they wanted to continue just looking into this character. And I know because Joaquin would even say it outwardly, like, oh, I wish we could just keep shooting, and just exploring it and trying things and playing and just like this character is fascinating to me, and I think that's obviously why he did such a great job on it. So I figured there was going to be a second one, and yeah, of course. And having done this with Hangover and Hangover 2, which was lightning in a bottle with Hangover, and then making a sequel, and then having the third one, even it's daunting. It is. It's frankly, to be frankly, it's daunting to sort of try to capture lightning in a bottle again, because it's also that you know amorphous thing that isn't easy to capture. And yes, you think about the expectations of the audience, your own expectations, the expectations of the studio, everything that comes with that. And then you kind of find a way to release it. And once you get into the work, that's usually like early days. But once also I read the script and realized it was such a departure and such a big swing, I was like, this is going to be great, because it's really such a unique take on the idea of expanding this story, that just the prospect of doing it in the way that we did it became daunting. And then I could release myself from all the expectations of following up the first one, and just say, oh, the movie in itself is a challenging experience, let's just embrace that.
Well, Arianne, you're jumping in with this merry band of players. I mean, obviously, one of the most beloved movies to have come out, I think, the last 5 years is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a movie that gets better every time you watch it. This couldn't be more different from that kind of a film, and with your amazing past designing costumes and working with people like Madonna, coming into this, were you scared? Was it for you? I mean, I was leaking out like this movie was a musical somehow, which probably was right up your alley. But I would imagine, again, the pressure was on. And what was it like for you to join the merry band of pranksters?
Well, I think the thing about what I look for in a new project is a challenge. And this presented a couple challenges for me. A reunion of sorts, because Joaquin and I worked together on Walk the Line. So that was really thrilling. I'm a huge fan of Todd's and also of Larry's. Knowing, I have to say that I always make my decision is always about the script first, and then it's who are the main players for me, not even the actors. I mean, in this case for sure, but it's always about who's the DP, who's the production designer, who are my cohorts, my other department heads that I can collaborate with. So um, daunting, I will use Larry's word, daunting was, besides the fact, because not only well, the script got me at hello. um, Scott Silver is such a great writer. Him and Todd put together this script that was just like amazing, because it's hard to, that the first film was so perfect that the only way, Larry, I think you said it so well. It was such a big swing, and I think that balls out of like expanding this notion of the music in Arthur, and this duplicity of Arthur and the Joker archetype and his shadow self was so interesting to me. And so that was really great. But just like in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, walking onto this set with into a family. So like it was my first time I worked with Quentin, and that was super daunting, because what's really important for me is to honor, the like in Quentin's case, his visual language, because he has such a specific visual language. And in Joker's case, with what Todd and Larry have created together, and Todd and Scott and Joaquin, um, let alone my colleague and friend Mark Bridges, I felt that the directive for me was to build on what they created, be able to seamlessly help extend that world. And then the challenges for me and the directive for me is to bring something else, to bring kind of outsider eyes to this beautiful world that's created while honoring that. So, you know, Mark Bridges is one of my favorite costume designers, and we know each other. And luckily I could have a dialogue with him so before, and I spent a lot of time. I watched the movie multiple times, and just Larry's lighting, the textures, and being able to work within that palette was really exciting to me. And then we have all this ability to expand that with our fantasy sequences in with color in a way that is kind of another layer of this movie, was really exciting. So I felt that I wanted, it was hallowed ground, this beautiful film that was so perfect, Joker, and then being like having to bring something to that. So yeah, and it was, and it's also a family, like Mark Freeberg, Larry, Emma, Scott, Todd, Joey, everyone, like all the players, are coming back. So I was the new kid on the block. It wasn't the first time. And, just, I have to say thank you again to Larry so many times, because Larry really helped me a lot with color, because the colors Todd is very specific tonally about color, and we got to spend some time early on in pre-production, where we went to Panavision, and we was it Panavision?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask, like the two of you, I mean, I think you both bring. I mean, Larry, I remember seeing the first Hangover, and it's a comedy, but it had a sheen to it. I mean, not exactly maybe like a Blade Runner sheen, but it had a really great look. And I thought that was a really interesting choice to make for what was really a very bawdy comedy. And you didn't see comedies kind of shot the way you shot it. I loved it for that reason. And as I said, and I'm going to say it live, you made the best Monsterverse movie with Mike Dougherty, Godzilla King of the Monsters. I love your lensing. And I love what you do with it. And I'm just curious, when a costume designer and a director of photography get together, where color is so specific. And of course, Arianne, you had to deal with the fact that the Joker's iconic Joker outfit was already pre-decided for you, but now you have the idea of doing musical numbers, and you come out of a background working in opera and working with a rock star like Madonna. Now you're going to be working with Lady Gaga, and now you're working with Larry and Todd. How did the two of you, because I would imagine in this particular instance, your collaboration would be incredibly important, coming in and out of fantasy sequences and dealing with the talent like Lady Gaga, who knows, I mean, she's known for her costumes. How did the two of you begin work together?
Well, I think I really, going into the project, I knew it was going to be photographed beautifully, and that gave me a sense of, I guess, firm footing and security. And it was just figuring out what the nuances were. So I did elicit Larry's input, especially in the beginning, and also because um, I think a lot of it's just a stupid practical thing, but when we do our fittings, we take pictures with an iPhone, and the way that they're calibrated, they're very blue, and it wasn't helping me when we were trying to figure out the color of we have a lot of uniforms from Arkham that we created. And Larry, like those early days, really, really helped me when we did the camera test. And then it was just keep talking and getting feedback from Todd. And we had meetings together with Todd and with Mark. And then there was a couple critical times when Larry actually came to the costume shop at Western Costume. We were at Western Costume, which is, we're kind of a satellite from where everyone else is at the studio. And Larry was really generous with helping me calibrate what the color would be. And I'm super grateful to you, Larry, for that, because we don't always have that luxury, right? Everyone's on scouts or
Yeah.
running around.
Well, I mean, the way I treat it is I'm a big fan of testing. I'm a big fan of anything that allows us to see the image as it will be seen on screen, because the problem is so much of prep is done slightly in a vacuum. We're constantly collaborating and working together. Arianne, myself, Mark Friedberg to constantly share notes about like what's the color palette of this scene, so we can. And whenever you do that really well, like this new Joker film and others, that's when everything's really singing. When our three departments are really collaborating in all ways, right? You understand the lighting because they're never done, in their own sort of siloed world. And the problem with so many things is like you don't see it until it's too late. And so we tried to just get in there as early as possible, going to the camera rental house and putting it under some real lights with like the real lookup table that would actually reference like the way the movie's going to look when it's on screen. Because it's not until you get there that you actually now start to see. And so even Todd having to make a decision on tonality or color, it's really unfair to try to do it with just an iPhone or all those other things. So we tried to just get in there early, help each other to try to because there's no right answer. The answer comes to you often from trying things. And the thing that I've learned from Todd, and I quite appreciate it, but for anyone new to Todd's world, it can be a unique experience. And particularly the way that we sort of made Joker and then made this new Joker was an extension of that, which is it's a fluid experience. Things are changing all the time. And Todd is an extremely, extremely good director who understands exactly what he wants. But with that said, there's an exploration process, and that exploration process happens during prep, but it also happens while we're shooting. So, and Arianne did an incredible job because it's really hard because you have to constantly find almost plan Bs and plan Cs to wardrobe and to find options, because it's not that you don't like something, it's that the idea changes. It's that the idea of the character sort of like I remember working on The Hangover and really understanding that the movie discovers itself in those first 3 or 4 weeks of making it. And when you introduce a new character, we shot the movie sort of in somewhat chronological order, meaning we shot early days with Arthur by himself in Arkham alone, and then Gaga joined the production at the beginning of January after we've been shooting for 3 weeks.
Wow.
So now it's a new experience of bringing in the most important new character in the movie, and also then fluidly discovering what her character is going to be, because even with all the planning, it's not until you actually start to photograph it and you start to get the two of them together, and then comes the next pass of like, okay, well, let's try something different. And we constantly really try things while we're making the movie. Todd never wants to go back and make the movie 6 months later, as is a common practice with reshoots and additional photography and things like that. He's like, we're making the movie now. Anything we want to explore happens now. So if we want to try something different, we're going to do it now. And that becomes part of the process. And it's quite exciting once you jump into it, but it can also be quite like sort of chaotic and exhilarating and frustrating and all this sort of things. But it's super, super fun way to make a movie. And of course the work is fantastic. And we always found it. So the idea of trying to find it 6 months before you make it, 3 months before you make it, is a bit of folly, because it's not until you get to like shooting it on stage and on set where you really discover what's working. And so that collaboration between our departments, I think, was what was so gratifying.
One of the,
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The schedule actually was really helpful for me because we started at Arkham with this big, it was a lot of uniforms. And for me, I had development time with Stephanie, Lady Gaga, where I myself needed the sense of play that Larry speaks about, that Todd are essential to Todd and Joaquin's exploration and development. I so was appreciative of it because I needed that as well to find my footing with this new character. And luckily for me, I had Stephanie. We did these Mondo they were like workshop fittings, because we really push, she has her process, what she brought to the table of like wanting to explore. She's also really curious and really game for exploring. So we really, while I would go to set when we were establishing new characters, we were in a lot of continuity at Arkham. So I did have the freedom in the it was like October, November, to really have these kind of workshop fittings with Stephanie, where we went through so many different iterations of who Lee Quinzel is and becomes as Harley. And one thing I will say is that before, Todd had really, using the original Joker suit as the archetype for Joker, which I knew was going to make an appearance in this movie, and then building on that was really exciting because I brought this concept. I was very inspired by Peter Greenaway's movie, The Cook, the Thief, His Wife,
Oh, yeah.
Lover, where the costumes change from that dolly shot. Larry, do you remember that movie with the dolly shot? And then the costumes change color from room to room. So Todd, lucky for me, Todd and Joaquin both really. So we use the silhouette and use that as a sense of play to jump off with color. And I did something in this film that I feel I was given permission to do because of the first film, which is because the Joker suit is this very deep red. It actually, in the original film, there are a couple versions of it in different color reds. And I usually, red and green are always really challenging for me on film. I just find that, kind of for your reason, Larry, like you know, you can invest in those colors, and then in a fitting or in the room, and then it looks crazy on film, or digitally, how the color gets oversaturated, or just too much. That can happen with blue, green, and red. And for the most part, I usually am
RGB.
pretty light, have a light touch with those colors. But I felt that, Larry, you gave me permission to play with red, because, and where you see it in the kind of the most realized final costume of Harley Quinn, which is color wise an homage to the original character, while creating our own world of a realistic world. And I feel so proud of that red, because the way you shot it, Larry, it's so rich and deep and beautiful. And I don't know if I would have had that confidence had I not kind of bought into what you guys did with the Joker suit in the first movie. So that was really exciting to me. I mean, I'm really proud of these costumes. We built all of her costumes, and the kind of journey that we went on. And this is not you know I'm not it was a joyful experience being able to create this new character, but that had to fit seamlessly into this world. And I would say Stephanie was the best scene partner I could have had, in terms of all that time we had. And she was very flexible, because we would you know these workshops and stuff. And I really I'm super I've seen the film. I'm really, really proud of it. And a lot of it has to do with, I think, um the tonal, the seamlessness, the quietness, and yet this vibrancy that we're able, this extra layer that is kind of a partner with the music, that I find exciting. And Larry, so delicious. Like, it's such a delicious movie to look at. It's dark, and it's haunting, and it's shocking, but it's so fucking beautiful. Like, so I love that dichotomy in story and visuals. And it does have a patina of grunge that gives it a kind of a firm footing and a reality. So, I mean, it was I just felt like I was working with this beautiful team, this family that so understand each other. And Joaquin was very, very generous in making sure that there was that that bringing me into the world. And I will say the craziest thing Joaquin said to me, or not crazy, but is on our first day, he's like, I guess we only make movies with music, which was really sweet.
um,
It was a embarrassment of riches, this film.
well, Larry, I would ask you about obviously I love the look of the first Joker. I mean, I grew up loving movies. I'm from Seattle, but I loved any movie that was set in grungy New York because it was totally alien from my experience. And all I wanted to do was see all the garbage on the streets and the dumpsters and all that horrible New York in the 70s. I loved it. And you kind of brought that vibe back for the first Joker. But I would imagine that going into these dream sequences, I remember seeing the first trailer, and there's that one shot where they're dancing, I guess, on the roof. And I'm like, what a to go from the first Joker to see images like that. I'm like, oh, that alone. I'm like, you had me at hello. And what were some of the influences? Did you and Todd Phillips? I mean, people don't know that Todd Phillips made one of the great music documentaries of all time and hated the Gigi Allen story, which I don't recommend everybody who watches this show watch, but if you want an interesting experience, check it out. Did you guys talk about different influences, and do you go back and look at things or things that inspired the two of you and things that you were trying to emulate or things that you looked at and wanted to do the exact opposite?
I think for us, and obviously, even in creating a tool like ShotDeck, references are a part of my exploration of any creative thing. So it's funny, I think maybe because Todd and I have worked together for so long, we don't have as many specific conversations about those things as you would think. But what we do is we sort of throw ideas out there and explore them, mostly to determine what it isn't. But like Todd would bring to some things, right? There was a documentary called Titty Cut Follies, which is a documentary about this Bridgewater institution in Massachusetts where it was like a terrible environment. I think it was responsible for some change in how they treat inmates, particularly mentally ill inmates, and that became a sort of a talking point. I've mentioned this before. It's not as big as people think, even though it became sort of what people think, which is a movie from One from the Heart, which is a Coppola movie.
Yep.
That was somewhat a conversation starter, more because it was a conversation about how remarkable it was that Coppola decided to build this incredible environment all on stage. And our movie was very stage heavy. And as somebody who loves being on real locations and outdoors and all the things, I really loved, this movie is so much about stage. It's about characters. It's about creating characters. It's about this balance between the light and the dark, the shadow self and the real self. The movie opens with literally a curtain opening and lights coming on, and the first words on screen are Brendan Gleeson saying, wakey wakey, it's showtime. It's like we're and this happens in the fantasies. It happens throughout the movie. It happens in the look, from the wardrobe to production design to lighting, that we're constantly playing with this idea of theater and being on stage. And when he transforms back into Joker to become his own defense attorney, he's now embracing his most theatrical selves. You look at sort of Lee's characters from the time she starts arriving at the courtroom and is sitting in the third row from the back to the time at the end when she's right behind him at his defense table. That transition is like her transitioning into being part of the stage, which is where she wants to be from the beginning. So all these things become basically what you're referencing as far as how do those translate to the decisions we make, and that translates into color, strength and power from Red. The movie starts in a very blue space because it's raining and he's in the worst possible place. He's basically dead inside. She brings to it warmth, right? That has to come from the wardrobe. The color that happens when they're in fantasies is very vibrant, right? It's a combination, but it's also changing during the scene. On that rooftop dance that you talked about, a lot of these scenes transition from blackness, and each time a light comes on, it reveals something. So in that scene, it reveals her silhouetted dancing body, much like him in his transformation in the first Joker dancing. But then the warm light comes in when they are joined together. He's smoking in the blue and comes together. Then we bring up warm light, which is their love. And then that light goes out at the end to transition back into the next part of the scene, and goes to this sort of green light that's coming from the Arkham sign that says Hotel Arkham. So it's constantly, the light's constantly changing to sort of follow the emotion of the scene. And that translates throughout. And this sort of beautiful combination of us talking together, whether it's in the fantasies, which are, of course, referencing the big 30s and 40s musicals in which they would build everything on these massive stages
Right.
at Warner Brothers and elsewhere. And you would build it real with like painted backgrounds, which we did, like hand painted backgrounds of skies and cityscapes and stuff like that, which exist in both the chapel scene as well as the rooftop scene. But the sort of starkness of like the chapel when they get married in this fantasy of her, and I remember when we were looking at the different options for her wedding dress, but her white wedding dress and his totally white suit in a black void, and then we start to introduce where they are. Oh, and then there's a white, like lit up, path for her to dance to find him, and then they kiss in the most warm sunset of all the whole movie, right? And so these kind of like lighting and color choices are the constant conversations that we have between the three of us and Todd and all the sort of that. And yes, sometimes we bring up movies, but not as much as people would think.
Was there, obviously you had a very set look with the first film and you're still in that world, but then you were given an opportunity to leave the reality of existence or whatever. Did you make a conscious decision? Were you shooting those fantasy sequences in a very different way? Were you using different cameras, maybe different lenses in terms of like going from zooms to primes, or was there something you did to accentuate the fantasy realm?
The biggest thing is we really liked the whole IMAX. IMAX was, we shot the first movie spherical in 1.85 for just every theater to have the same format. But we really thought this was a great opportunity to shoot it specifically for IMAX. And with that, the meaning when you go to an IMAX theater, the frame changes based on the content of the scene. And so that was a huge difference. And we really thought about that at every stage. So we made a very specific map of the whole movie. And when we thought we would want to expand from, in the case of the new film, a 2.2 aspect ratio, which is wider and, sort of narrower at top and bottom, expands to 1.90, which is similar to the first film. And in certain screens, it expands all the way to 1.43, which is like this. So it becomes this really immersive experience where you're expanding the world in certain elements of the movie. And they don't always come in the fantasies. They come sometimes when they're just singing diegetically, like the first time Arthur sings in the movie, and other times like that. So we use that as another tool, just like lighting and color and wardrobe. And
please tell me you'll preserve that on the physical media. That you'll make.
I hope so.
You'll make Warner Brothers. I mean, Warner Brothers pioneered doing that with 4K discs with Christopher Nolan's work.
I know.
And then they didn't do it with Dune.
I know, and I literally had that conversation with
bad Warner Brothers.
So I will. Here's all I can say is I will try my damnedest to like make sure they do that, because I believe in that too. But I know that yes, we've been talking about it. So
because the people that work at Warner Brothers Home Video, with the exception of George Feltenstein, and I'll say this, I've said this on my physical media show, they don't quite know what's up, and they don't understand that why this is important. And tell them, make it look like, hey, sell it, make it more expensive, do a special edition, do whatever you have to do, but you got to preserve that aspect ratio.
And I mean, that's the version that I know Todd wants everyone to see the most, because it's the one that he, I think, really embraced in the edit, which was this one that changes aspect ratio. I think that is the actual version of the movie that should be
Yeah.
the historical version. So I agree with you.
Were there does shooting with IMAX format in mind, with IMAX cameras? I mean, obviously we've heard about there's sound issues, but was there did you have to approach things differently because of that in terms of the way you would normally shoot a Joker movie?
No, because we still use the same camera bodies that we used with the first film, but we just had to accommodate for those different aspect ratios.
Oh, okay.
And so it's sort of protecting the sets and protecting the, making sure we don't see lighting and other things like that for when those moments would expand. So yeah, it was definitely something that you consciously thought about, and we kept in mind, with our operators and everybody throughout the experience. But once you get into the flow of it, you're like, it's pretty straightforward.
Arianne, I have to ask from a geeky perspective, did you delve in? You said you were paying homage to the first Harley Quinn costume. Did you delve into the history of Harley Quinn, how she was created on the animated series and then moved through her comic iterations and that kind of thing?
No, because I mean, I really, Todd, the way that Todd and Scott wrote this character, and knowing, the narrative and the character, the way that the film is a character-driven film based on, like the first one. I mean, of course, I knew of. Actually, the truth is, I didn't know much about Harley Quinn before the movie, and I chose not to. I mean, obviously, I know about Birds of Prey,
Yeah, sure.
but I actually did not know the comic because the animated series, which was in the 90s.
Right.
And we did in early conversations, it was brought up, but basically is exactly the opposite. We're creating real characters, real people, and there is so for me, no, not at all. I mean, I think the thing that I did embrace at the end after a lot of development, like really looking at all versions of Harley Quinn, and I think we were constantly sketching and doing all these fittings, until it felt right. Todd is such a great director. He was really able to keep, his feedback was always really supportive, and also pushing me forward, which is really what I'm used to. And I really do like being able to be encouraged to keep trying, and we had the time to. But I did, in the end. Stephanie really loved the animated series, and Stephanie initially really wanted to embrace, and you can understand why if you kind of look at these characters that she so brilliantly creates in
Oh,
his
yeah.
world. And they're almost like larger than life characters. And this film was really about being quiet, and not deciding for the audience. Like, I think we really had to discover, you know, Lee's journey and Lee's obsession with Arthur, and well, with Joker, really, and then her kind of um, development over the arc of the movie, her character development. And what I did end up homaging was the color palette. So it was red, black, and white, which it took I was really fighting against it. And then in the end, actually also on the shoulders of what Mark had done with the original Joker suit, that was grounded in his job as a clown, and that was so great. So I made a backstory about this costume that we see at the end of the movie, that she's cobbled it together from thrift stores, and she's in this punky. Our film actually takes place in the very early 80s, where it's where she would have picked up a piece from a thrift store, or made something, cut something out of a costume. So like her little corset top. So that was kind of the logic I put into the costume, because I wanted it to have logic. I wanted it to make sense. I wanted her to feel performative at the end. This is at the trial where we see her in her full realized Harley at the end of the film. And so I feel that um, in the end, that did, Stephanie's desire to connect with that part of Harley actually ended up working out. And I think, you know, I wanted to make her believable as Arthur is. I wanted to, and Stephanie and Todd both were so great about the character development, just in terms of her own, Harley's own mental health and instability or stability, as you will see in the movie. Um, so it was rigorous development, but it was so much fun. It was playing in the way that maybe Larry, you were talking about at the end of the first Joker. And, that's the thing I love about Joaquin. Joaquin, in a costume fitting, because he actually had a lot of costumes in this film. He has, that actually probably a lot more than the first one. He is always, and Todd as well, really about trying things. Let's try it. And that early camera test really informed a lot. Like when we did the suit, Larry, for the court, and the mustard and the browns and playing with different color. And I remember, and Todd was really super generous about encouraging. Like, I think after that camera test and we looked at the dailies, he was really, it was it was, I think for Todd it was like, I don't want to put words in the mouth, but he seemed delighted to see Arthur in this kind of court suit that
Yeah.
is not a Joker suit, and it's not, him, doing stand-up comedy with his cardigan on. So it is, it was like another angle on Arthur in in his court persona. So was a lot of opportunity to kind of bring, and I think that was the initial challenge for me about, um, you know, homaging the visual language of the first one and being able to bring something to Todd, to bring something to the characters. And then of course the development with Stephanie, which was, I would say, probably one of the most exciting and fruitful collaborations I've had with an actor. She was so generous with her time and so supportive, and she was a trooper. We just kept doing things over and over. We didn't, a lot of times in fittings, well, obviously you can't. A lot of times you'll be in a fitting room and you're like, that's it, that's the character. And I had that a few times, and then it just was like, well, it doesn't really live outside that room properly in the world that we're creating, kind of, Larry, like what you were talking about. And taking that and just keep pushing and pushing. And I would say that's reminiscent of the best. Todd is like the best directors I've worked with. Like Quentin's that way. Tom Ford actually is that way too, of just like, being relentless in our ability to, um, just kind of, you know, relentless in the ability to try all angles, try all angles, and especially with a new character. So it was great. I am, it's very rare that I feel, uh, that there, I really, I am very happy with the work. I feel very proud of the work. I mean, usually I'm disappointed when I see a film in my own work, and I was very, very happy. And I think a lot of that too, Larry, is not only the actors wearing the costumes, of course, but the way it was shot, and Todd's point of view. I mean, like the Joker and Harley show, um, fantasy sequences, just, that was fantastic. Robert, have you seen the film?
No, no, I haven't.
We'll see
And
it in a week, I guess.
yeah, I mean, and I'm a huge. As we're recording this interview, I haven't seen the film, and obviously, I'm a lifelong comic book. I mean, I've got literally tens of thousands of pages of comics in this room that I'm sitting in, and
Well, then
I
how did you feel about the first one? I
oh
mean,
no, I mean I thought the first one was I was knocked out by the first one because it was always the thing is when you're going to see a movie like this, you're obviously waiting. It's hard to think of Joker without the Batman. And when I saw Joker, and when I saw especially the costume design, when they went a different way, but it was still recognizably the Joker. Like, I have action figures. The high end, you're going to have, I can't wait to buy a high end action figure of Harley Quinn in that final costume because Hot Toys is going to make it. That $300 action figure that'll come from Hong Kong that Hot Toys is known for. To have those, you can line all those Jokers up. And when you get to Joaquin's Joker and different color palette, leaning into those reds as opposed to purples and things, but it's still recognizably Joker. And again, the color palette, Larry, that you brought to the first film, I think I saw that movie 4 times in the theater. I was the movie looks so good at the Burbank 16 in the Dolby Cinema, with those deep, rich blacks.
A good one, yeah.
Yeah, because the thing about your lensing, I think it's true of a lot of your movies, Larry. That's why if you get the films you've done with Dolby Vision at home, if you're getting a 4K disc or something, it's really important to have the proper color. And I think one of the great things is when you go to a Dolby Vision cinema at AMC, not that this is an ad for them, but they've calibrated their projectors so what you're seeing is essentially what you want the audience to see. The most in my own life, the worst experience you can have is when the bulb isn't bright enough in a movie theater. It's like fingers on a chalkboard for me, and they skimp, but not anymore. So going to these IMAX theaters and seeing these films the way they're meant to be projected is something in the modern age that is a revelation. And I was going to ask you, Larry, on this film, as opposed to the first film or maybe your previous collaborations with Todd, what surprised you the most in terms of where you were coming from a cinematographer's point of view? Is there something here that stood out, or was it another day at the office for you guys? Or was there something here that, as you were moving through these sequences and trying to figure out how you go in and out of a fantasy sequence to the reality you're creating, did you have something that surprised you or that you didn't really anticipate when you first started?
Well, I think we set out at the beginning of the movie, and I had an idea of like, okay, the first one taught me how much flexibility that I wanted to give them, and that was always a case, but it really came to a head on the first one. And so in approaching this Folie Deux, I thought, well, Todd had always sort of really expressed that filmmaking is really a form of jazz, right? That you can't, it's not something, it just inherently is about sort of getting all these musicians together, and then sort of when it goes live, that's when everyone really comes to play. And that was, I think, really the foundational element of making this movie was this jazz idea. And so even though there's edits and there's this, it's not all oneers and crazy things like that. There's some of those things for sure. But even those things, whether they're what looks like coverage or they're a very complex one-shot sort of thing, they're all made with jazz. Meaning they're all made in the moment, in real time, and that was the most exciting part about making the movie. And it obviously provided, I had the best crew I've ever had. So for me, all the preparation that we were able to do and thinking about that and knowing that freedom was really the most important thing, when it came time to yell, action and go for it with no rehearsals, no marks, every lights up
Really?
set. Yeah, never, not once.
Hence jazz.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jazz. And so then it was just like, let's lock in, and between the operator and the dolly grip and the crane operator or whatever tool we had to tell the story from a camera standpoint, and lighting, which was constantly changing in real time during the scenes. It was just so exciting. It was like you're now watching a performance and just saying, like, it's almost as if I'm being told where the camera wants to go by the actors in real time. So often it would be like, well, what are we going to do with this shot? And I'm like, I don't know. But let's find out. And then we would just sort of let it happen. And some of that stuff is takes that are in the movie in massive ways, and then other things are just, oh, now we have a sense of this. Now if we just do these, if I start the next scene in a whole different part of the room and explore that idea, and then the next, and suddenly you have a bunch of different sides of the action to be able to cut with.
Right.
And you'll see it, the movie will feel very precise and very sort of thought out in its final product.
Sure.
But it was pure jazz.
Larry,
right?
I have to say that your, with Shot Deck and your ability, like there are some tableaus, some images that I think will go down in cinematic history, and they are in the trailer, so there's no spoiler here. But the one when Lee uh, paints the smile
Sure.
on the glass with Arthur behind the glass, is just, it's goosebumps. It's
was that scripted?
No.
Oh my God!
In fact,
so poetic.
It wasn't even done on every take. We actually just brought it in the end as an idea to sort of end the scene with, and we only did it 3 times. And the first time, it wasn't even that stuff. It wasn't like we really rehearsed it. I remember it was like we drew it out, and it was like an idea of where Joaquin needed to be, but it's not like we fiddled with it that much. It was just like, that's the basic idea. We rolled that take. At the end of the take, she did it, and then he leaned over, and I mean, you can hear it on the dailies. It's just everyone was sort of like, oh, that worked. Like, I thought it was going to take us hours, and it kind of, I think we did it 3 times. I think the one that's in the movie is either the first take or the third take, and it was like, but it was one of those things where, like, that's a great idea.
That's jazz.
And of course, it's not like with any of those things, it's happening. We have these headsets that we can whisper to each other. And so we're constantly sort of communicating sort of, when the camera needs to move, when the focus needs to rack, those kind of things. So the team of people around the camera are sort of quietly sort of creating, decisions in real time. We're changing lighting all the time in real time. And so even those tableaus, or even these shots that feel really composed, are still functions of finding it in the moment.
But I think what you're describing is, to me, the ultimate example of how filmmaking is a collaborative art. Because once, like you said, you had your best crew, you've got everybody that knows their jobs. And everybody, it's like having a team, working all. I can't think of a better. What you're describing to me is nirvana, in terms of being on a set and watching all of you collaborate. I would love to have been shooting behind the scenes on this movie just to see you guys work this way, because, my God, what an exciting way to make movies. And that, Arianne, I'm so glad you brought up that shot, because that, when I first saw the trailer and saw that shot, I'm like, that's going to go down in every montage in the history of cinema from now on, because that idea and that it was so perfect. It was. I'm so glad you brought that up, because
some of my, there are so many, but the other beautiful sequence that you shot, Larry, in the courtroom, when we have a fantasy sequence with this spotlight. And, Larry, your use of playing with silhouettes, which for me as a designer, I always start with silhouette and color, just in terms of design in general. And it's thrilling for me in the dance sequence, and of course with the Joker fantasy in the courtroom, the silhouette and that beautiful spotlight. I just think I was really excited when stills went up on Shot Deck from the trailer, because when you watch dailies now, of course we all get them digitally, and it's sad we don't have the communal experience of seeing them together. There are many times where the dailies on this movie took my breath away, that being one of the times. And, I'm by myself. I don't have the joy of being in a room like we used to. Although
Yeah, that's a bad thing.
I
You know,
yeah,
that would be good
it's
to bring back.
convenient, but it's not as good to look at it small. But what it was just a goosebump moment where I just you know just felt so privileged to be collaborating with you and with Todd and with Mark, and it is just an embarrassment of riches, like a dream team. And I'm thankful Mark Bridges wasn't available, and Scott Silver, everyone on this movie, Emma, the producer.
Yeah, it was
It was
amazing.
just a really warm group of people. Like I really felt welcomed, which is always the concern when you're the new kid on the
It's
block.
hard to be the new kid. It's one of the sort of most challenging things about movie making in general, and everyone who's obviously worked for long enough understands it as part of the job, but that you're being thrown into an environment to do something really creative, really collaborative with people often you don't know, and particularly people that have their own work. And so it's this really beautiful thing where we're like creating this, this troupe of creative people to make
Welcoming, yeah.
something. Yeah, and you have to do it, and it's to me it's the thing that filmmakers and are so good at, because we're used to sort of having to do that in quick time, right? Because you don't have
Yeah, listening, adjusting, flexing,
all of it.
and willing to like keep going and be curious. I mean,
Get
I would
take
say
not get knocked out and not and still go, okay, I'm
back
gonna
up
still pitch the
again.
idea, have a short memory, still pitch, whatever, all the things, all the ups and downs of trying to be collaborative and creative, particularly when you're the new person in a group, or if everyone's coming together to make something for the first time. I love it, but it's one of the fun challenges that has nothing to do with creativity. It has to do with like
But it has
interpersonal thing.
everything to do with, for me, in order for me to be fully feel invested creatively, I need to feel welcomed and
Sure.
encouraged. And, Todd was super generous with me and you and everyone. So I think because you guys had, you know, carved out this beautiful world in the first film, it was like, come hither, come in, come in. So it was great. I spent a lot of time with Mark Freeberg, the production
Yeah.
designer. It was like basically JP Jones, the prop guy, myself, and Stephanie, Lady Gaga, who were the new kids. And
Yeah,
so
that's
we would
right.
check in with each other, like, because we had to calibrate, right? We had to calibrate. So it was great. It was great. And it was really exciting to also create a female character in a Todd Phillips movie, because a female lead, because it's not every day that Todd has had a female lead in his films. So I thought that was really great, and Todd was really, like, in the beginning, Todd and Stephanie and I had a lot of conversations, and at a certain point he's just like, you guys go do your thing and show me what you have. So it was great. It was everything everything I had hoped it would be.
Yeah.
well,
I
I
always wish, how they have, like, obviously they don't do it as much anymore, deleted scenes, and of course there's obviously in my job there's always deleted shots and
Yeah.
scenes and things that are. But I think about all the wardrobe and the costumes that we didn't use that I wish people could see, because there's some amazing ones, like some of the options for like the Harley Joker show, and like those different dresses and stuff
Right,
for her
right, right,
were
right, right.
amazing. Were amazing. I think about some of the things that it's like that's all part of the process of getting to what we ended up with, which is amazing. But even that is like, I always wish people could see behind the curtain to see some of those options.
I wish we could still make special features like that.
Yeah.
But, well, I want to thank you both for being here. This has been the fastest hour I think I've ever done on this show. But Arianne Phillips, Lauren Sher, I said I can't call you Larry. I mean, we don't really know each other, but it's great to have you both. This was a tremendous show. for Designing Hollywood. I want to thank Western Costume. It's great that they're a sponsor of this particular episode, seeing as you name-checked them and they were such a big part of getting the movie made. So that's very, very exciting. And I want to thank you both for being on the Designing Hollywood show, and everybody should go see, how do you pronounce it? Folie à Deux?
Deux.
Deux.
Like,
Folie à Deux, yeah. Like.
By the way, I only know this because I talked to a French journalist, and I kept saying Folie à Deux, which is like
bidding you adieu.
Yeah, or like part two or something like that.
Right.
You think of it like two, right? Which is obviously my American bias. And she just kept laughing. She's like, no, it's like the, like
Folie à Deux.
Oh, right. That is very French. Like, it's like that. So you sort
Folie à Deux.
But even with that, I still say Folie à Deux. So I screwed up.
Yeah, me too. It's American in me.
Well, thank you.
Everyone will go see it October 4th in theaters and IMAX.
That's right.
Well, thank you both for being here, and what a great episode of the Designing Hollywood podcast.
Our pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you. Good seeing you.
Thank
See you at the
you.
premiere.
A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from The John Campea Show. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at Post Geek Singularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.